Okay, now this is the second part of today's session. We have previously listened to Arash and Golnaz talk very beautifully and completely about gods and goddesses related to water and sea. And I'm going to tell you some extra details because your friends did an amazing job of giving us all of the necessary details. So, as we said, Poseidon is best known as the great god of water and the great god of sea, but he's not alone. We have so many other divinities and gods and goddesses related to water and the sea. Now, the first one I want to talk about now is Pontus, that your friends also talked about. Pontus was produced by Gaia in the initial stages of creation. So we have Pontus, who was created by Gaia, the Mother Earth herself. And then two of the titans from the marriage of Gaia and Uranus. Two of the titans are also very much related to water and the sea, and those are Oceanus or Oceanus. میتونید حدس بزنید دیگه بچه اوکیانوس از هم اقیانوس میاد دیگه. So Oceanus and Tethys. These are two of the titans who were created after the marriage of Gaia and Uranus, who are related to the water and sea and river in general. And so they had thousands of children. Oceanus and Tethys were a couple, okay? Just like Zeus's father and mother, who were titans, and who one of those 12 titans who married each other 2 by 2, Oceanus and Tethys also married each other, and they had thousands of children, which we call Oceanids. In addition, Pontus himself, mated with his mother Gaia. پس Mother Earth رو داشتیم گایا که خودش پانتس رو به وجود آورده بود، ولی بعداً پانتس و گایا هم معاشقه داشتن با. And so they created Nereus, the oldest of the children, who was the old man of the sea, and he could foretell the future. Nereus united with Doris, one of the Oceanids. So Nereus, the son of Pontus and Gaia, married one of the Oceanids, and then they created a lot of daughters called the Nereids. And so these were mermaids, okay? And 3 of them, as your friends also told you, are very important for us: Thetis, Galatea, and Amphithrite. So let's talk about Thetis first. Well, Thetis was destined to bear a child who would be stronger than even Zeus. And that's why Zeus learned about these secrets from Prometheus and avoided Thetis completely. Said, I don't want to sleep with you anymore. And instead, Thetis married another person, another mortal called Proteus. Now, Thetis was a very, very difficult bride who couldn't be easily won. Why? Because Thetis had the power of changing her shape all the time, becoming a bird, becoming a tree, becoming a tigress in rapid succession, one after the other. And so it was extremely difficult for her suitors, for her lovers, to actually convince her to marry them. But Proteus was also very headstrong. He was also very determined. And so he finally he could convince Thetis to marry him. Now, Proteus and Thetis celebrated their marriage with great ceremony. توی سرنوشت تتیس بود که بچه‌ای به دنیا میاره که از زئوس هم قوی‌تر و بزرگتر خواهد شد در میثولوژی. و زئوس دیگه بیخیالش شد، گفت حالا که اینطوریه من عمرن بخوام یه بچه به دنیا بیاد که از خودم قوی‌تر باشه. و گفتن اگر تتیس دیگه با زئوس ارتباطی نداشته باشه اون بچه به دنیا نمیاد. But the child that she bore with Proteus became Achilles. Achilles was one of the greatest warriors in the Trojan War. We will talk about the Trojan War later. And so he actually became even more important than Zeus. And so Achilles was born and became a great warrior. Now, this is the fight between Peleus and Thetis, so that Peleus could finally convince Thetis to marry him. Now, the second daughter that we talked about, remember, we talked about three mermaids, three Nereids, Thetis, Galatea, and Amphithrite. The second one was Galatea. Now, Galatea was worshipped, was loved by one of the Cyclops, those one-eyed creatures called Polyphemus. Now, Polyphemus was extremely ugly. He was very fierce, very violent. And that's why Galatea rejected Polyphemus and tried to run away with his gentle lover Acis or Achis. یادتون باشه بچه حرف سی توی قدیم که بیشتر خونده میشد واسه اینه که مثلا اوشیانس که ما مدرنش رو میگیم اوکیانس هم گفته میشه یا مثلا سیلیا اون مانستری که توی دریاها سیلرها رو میخورد اسکایلیا یا اسکیلیا هم خونده میشه. So Polyphemus tried to win Galatea, but because he was ugly, he was very violent, Galatea rejected him and tried to run away with her new lover, Acis. However, Polyphemus tried to, make himself a gentleman. So he tried to comb his hair, he tried to shave his ugly beard so that Galatea would actually listen to him and then would actually marry him. But then even Ovid tells us this story in a beautiful way, and he says that when Galatea was sleeping with Acis, at some point, Polyphemus was standing on the ground singing songs for Galatea to leave Acis and then to marry him. And so at some point, when Galatea, and this is the story from Ovid, which I have brought for you, اینجا اونجاییه که پولیفمس اون سایکلاپه داره آواز میخونه و از گالاتیا خواهش میکنه که ایسیس رو ول کنه بره با این باشه. So now Galatea, come, don't despise my gift. Certainly I know what I look like. Just recently I saw myself in the reflection of a limpid pool and I was pleased with the figure that I saw. Look at what size I am. Jupiter in the sky doesn't have a body bigger than mine. And so he goes on trying to court, trying to win Galatea, but of course Galatea is sleeping with Acis. And so at some point, you can read the story later on here, Galatea becomes, is hiding with Acis, but then Polyphemus becomes angry with them and suddenly attacks them and kills Acis. And so that's the story of the second Nereid, Galatea. So we talked about Thetis, who gave birth to Achilles, who became an extremely significant figure in Greek mythology. But we also have this story of Galatea, the Cyclops, Polyphemus, and of course Acis. And then finally we have the third Nereid who was extremely important, and this is the story of Amphithrite. Now Amphithrite became the wife for Poseidon, and she was also a very hard to get bride, but then Poseidon was finally able to convince her to marry him. And so they are just like Zeus and Hera in the sky, but they are in the water. So Zeus and Hera are the king and the queen of Olympus, and then Poseidon and Amphitrite are the king and the queen of water. And they had a son, Triton, that your friends talked about beautifully. He was a merman. We have mermaids. A mermaid is a person with the upper body of a female person, female human being, and the lower body of the fish. And a merman is the upper body of a man, and the lower body of the fish. So this Triton is actually an important figure. Another important creature related to the sea, everyone, is Proteus, the shapeshifter. Now, Proteus is a sea divinity, and then he was just like Poseidon. Of course, in some stories, they say that Proteus was Poseidon himself in one shape. But then what is the most important thing about Proteus? The most important thing about him is that he's just like Nereus. Do you remember Nereus, the old man who could tell the future? Proteus can also predict the future, and he can also change his shape to whatever is necessary. So Proteus is also very important because he can change his shape. And we have two different stories about Proteus. One is in Homer's Odyssey, and the other one is in Virgil. So he's mentioned in two different accounts, in Greek mythology and in Roman mythology. اینجا منالس توی جنگ تروی که دارن فرار میکنن میگه یه جایی رفتیم و با پروتئوس روبرو شدیم، هرچی ازش خواهش میکردیم، چون یونانیا در بازگشت از جنگ تروی خیلیشون گم شدن توی دریا و از خدایان طلب کمک میکردن. یکی از اونها منالس بود. منالس میگه ما هرچی بهش میگفتیم تو رو خدا جون خودت راه رو به ما نشون بده. ببین چطوری میگه We rushed upon him with a shout and threw our arms about him. But the old man did not forget his devious arts. First off, he became a thickly maned lion, and then a serpent, a leopard, and a great boar, and then he became liquid water and a tree with lofty branches. But we held on him firmly with steadfast spirit, and finally the devious Proteus grew weary and answered Menelaus's questions about his way to return home. So Proteus is also very important. But then, of course, the most important sea creature that Golnaz talked about also is the story of Poseidon himself, who's very similar in shape to Zeus. And then he has this magic trident here, and then the most important thing about Poseidon is that he's very, very severe and rough. He's very angry all the time. And then he, as I have written for you, he's very ferocious. He's the supporter of the earth, but he's also the earth shaker. And that's why, because he's the earth shaker, a lot of people call him the god of earthquakes. Okay, so Poseidon is also extremely important. His Roman name, as your friends also said, is Neptune, and he's always portrayed as riding this carriage, this chariot. And then a lot of writers, especially, for example, Ovid, have tried to portray him, but not just they have portrayed his angry side, but then they also tell him to be kinder. So Ovid in this passage argues that Poseidon was extremely ferocious and angry, but then they ask him to be kind and to show mercy, especially to human beings. Now, the origins of Poseidon are much disputed. There are so many different stories about where Poseidon actually came from. Some people say that the trident was actually the thunderbolt, and so because he was initially the god of sky, but later on, when Zeus becomes the god of the sky and the god of Olympus, well, he was demoted. درجهش کاهش پیدا کرد, and so he became the god of the sea and water in general. But he's also considered to be a god for fertility, the god of the earth as well, and that's why he can change his shape to whatever he likes, and then he mates with a lot of people, especially Demeter, who was herself a god of fertility and regeneration, and so both of them, or the marriage between these two, the affair between these two, is symbolic about the fertility of the earth. But then, of course, as we said, he was very ferocious. He was very angry. He was fighting people all the time. And your friends also talked about this. He fought in many wars. He fought even some other gods. And the most famous of the fights between them is the fight between Poseidon and Athena for the control of Athens, the city of Athens that your friend talked about. And here you can see the picture, the fight between Poseidon and Athena for the control of Athens. Who wants to become the king or the queen of Athens? Now, some other sea creatures are also very important for us. The first one is the Scylla, and then we have Charybdis. Now, these two mythological creatures were actually quite dangerous, and so they are the embodiments of the perils of the sea. این دوتایی که اینجا براتون آوردم، سیلا یا سکیلا و کریبدیس، تقریبا میشه گفت که تبدیل میشن به یک نماد، به یک سمبل از خطرات دریا برای دریانوردان. یعنی باز میگم اون تحلیلمون رو اگه ادامه بدیم ما سعی میکنیم داستانهای پشت این، یعنی اون منطق پشتش رو کشف کنیم. اینا یه جورایی میخواستن اشاره کنن به چی؟ به خطرات دریا برای دریانوردان و اینا. در نتیجه اومدن مثلا یه سری مخلوقات اساطیری ساختن. Now, Poseidon actually became interested in Scylla and then wanted to have an affair with Scylla, but then Amphithrite, Poseidon's wife, became extremely jealous, so she gave Scylla some magic herbs and turned Scylla into this huge monster who lives in a cave near the sea and then creates all of their whirlpools so as to drown the sailors who dare to cross her on the sea. Now, Ovid has a different story about Scylla and says that Scylla's transformation into a monster did not come from Amphithrite. They say that it was the result of Circe, a sorceress، یکی از جادوگران یونان باستانه. میگن که یه گلوکوس یه مورتالی بوده، حالا به هر دلیلی خوردن یه سری گیاه، داستانش اینطوریه، با خوردن یک سری گیاه جادویی این گلوکوس که یک مورتال بوده تبدیل میشه به یک گاد. خب بعد این گاد خب اسکیلا یه جورایی عاشقش میشه، اینو میبره پیش سرسی. اسکیلا گلوکوس رو میبره پیش سرسی که یه کاری کنه که اینو قبول کنن در جمع خدایان. اما سرسی خودش عاشق گلوکوس میشه و در نتیجه برای اینکه رقیبش اسکیلا رو از بین ببره، چون سورسرس بوده دیگه، سرسی یک به اصطلاح یک جادوگر خانوم بوده که میره یه سری مواد جادویی رو به اسکیلا میده و تبدیلش میکنه به یه مانستر که خودش بتونه با گلوکوس باشه. داستان سرگذشت زندگی سرسی توی یه رومانی به همین نام منتشر شده. 1-2 سال پیش یه رومانی فکر کنم بهش اشاره کردم تو جلسات اول به اسم سرسی. یه خانومی نوشته که استاد دانشگاه است توی آمریکا، میگه با این داستان سرسی من اصلا حال نکردم. یعنی چی؟ میگه به نظرم خیلی یک طرفه گفتن این سورسرسه، بعد خیلی بک‌گراندی بهمون ندادن که این سرسی حالا کی بوده، فقط به عنوان یه عجوزه اینو به ما نشون دادن که حالا رفته لاو یکی هم دزدیده. در نتیجه اومده یه رمانی نوشته به اسم سرسی که داستان سرسی رو از یه جنبه دیگه میگه، اینکه چطور سرسی در کل زندگیش تحقیر شده، اینکه چطور گلوکوس اصلا معشوقه خود سرسی بوده در اول و حالا میگن داستان دیگه، ولی گفته یک داستان فمینیستیه به اصطلاح که نشون بده که چرا این شخصیت‌های زن رو همیشه انقدر منفی نشون میدن، فرصت ابراز عقیده بهشون نمیدن، از اون ورم همش منفی 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 به تصویر کشیده میشن. So if you like you can read that novel. It's a very easy novel to read, and then this is Circe. So and then when Scylla becomes a monster, she lives in a cave near water, and then we also have another creature called Charybdis who was thrown into the sea by Zeus, and these two creatures symbolize the dangers of the sea for sea creatures, because if sailors want to move around this cave and this water, they suddenly create a whirlpool like this, and then they try to drown those sailors. We talked about Pontus and Gaia. We said that Gaia created Pontus, sea, but then Pontus and Gaia actually had an affair and they had some children. Two of the most important children that they created are Iris and the Harpies. Iris is the god of and the goddess of the rainbow. این هم چون به باد و به باران و آب و اینا ربط داره، لازم بود که به این هم اشاره کنم که دوستاتون نگفتن. پس پانتس و گایا دو تا بچه دیگه هم داشتن، آیریس و هارپیز. هارپیز موجودات که بچه بهش اشاره کردن موجودات شیطانی بودن با بدن پرنده و سر انسان مخصوصا خانم. ولی خب آیریس بیشتر مهمه برامون because Iris became the goddess of the rainbow. So this is the children and the descendants of Pontus and Gaia. So they had Nereus, they had Thomas, they had Phorcys, and then they had Eurybe. Nereus and Doris had 50 Nereids, they had Iris and the Harpies, and then finally, one of their children, two of their children, Phorcys and Keto, also had an affair, and they created some other famous creatures for us. They created the Graia and the Gorgons. Now, Phorcys and Keto, as I said, were siblings, and they were the son and the daughter of Pontus and Gaia. They had an affair, and they created the Graia and the Gorgons. Now, these are very, very famous creatures for us because they symbolize, the Graia symbolize the old age. And they are three sisters who have gray hair. They have only one tooth. And they symbolize the old age and becoming old. And so we also have the Gorgons, who are also some sisters. And the three most famous ones of them are the Steno, the Uriel, and Medusa, of course, who is the most famous one of them. So you can see their pictures here. These are the Graias, the three sisters who symbolize old age. And then we have Medusa, who was one of the Gorgons. And then her hair consisted of some snakes. And anyone who dared look at Medusa would actually turn into a stone. But then we had Perseus, who actually succeeded in killing Medusa without looking in the eye. So as I said, next session, at the beginning of the class, I will tell you some more details about the story of Medusa, and especially how Perseus killed Medusa without looking at her eyes. And then, of course, your friends, Said and Nastan, are also going to talk about Athena, Aphrodite, and Eros. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to class today and for listening to the lectures of your friends. I really enjoyed it. I will upload the videos for you after the class so that you can watch them later. There will be two videos. One video is dedicated to your friend's lecture, and then the second video will be my very, very brief lecture about these sea creatures, because your friends made my job really easy. So thank you very much, everyone. You can leave the class now, and I really hope you have a great week. I'll see you next week, and we will talk about some other interesting stories about these sea gods and goddesses and how they lived and what kind of relationship they had with human beings. And once the story of the gods are over, we will talk about some of the important mortals in the Trojan War. We will talk about some love stories, the love stories which are present in the Greek mythology. And then, of course, we will continue our discussions. So thank you very much again. Have a good day and see you next week.